Hello, welcome to the Space Podcast 3000 season finale countdown to This Again.
Yes, indeed.
Is that going to be the official subtitle? Colon this again? Better than Electric Boogaloo, I guess.
So, in case you're a new listener or otherwise can't remember from last season, our methodology is the three of us each individually ranked all the episodes of season 2 from most to least favorite, and
there were 19 in this time.
Yep, and they each got between 1 and 19 points depending on where they were ranked, and then all those got added together, and we used that to get sort of an average of our three lists to get the top 5 best and the top 5 worst episodes of the season. So, let's start with the number 5 worst episode of season 2, which would be episode 3, Ahead in the Polls.
I don't enjoy politics, I'll be honest. I mean, I still participate in them because I care. I just don't like having to, you know?
Yeah, well, even with the political thing aside, it's really just kind of a boring episode. It doesn't flow particularly well. It's like they get Bender to sell his body, which, I mean, he's done some selfish things, but that seems to be one of the rather odd. Bender is so hedonistic, it doesn't seem like he would ever really want to be without his body, even if they were to give so much money for it.
Yeah, for considering Bender, it is extremely short-sighted even for him. But, it's an interesting concept, bringing back an infamous president from U.S. history and having, their head run again. But it's kind of a wasted idea here. The episode is just a little bit not all that great.
It's important in the grander scheme because Nixon does become kind of a running character. And yeah, it's fine if they wanted to have kind of a villain president, and I guess it's even funnier if it was an actual person that could be considered a villain, because they have fake villains in this show as well, like Mom. But then, and I'm not against the idea of having kind of a real person, at least a caricaturized version of a real person as a villain in the show. But the episode really seemed kind of heavy-handed in how they went around accomplishing it.
Yeah, it is pretty clumsy. Just overall, I think the episode's it's not terrible, but there really is nothing particularly interesting here.
It just set up Nixon to reoccur as a character, and that's about the most significant thing about it.
Yeah, that's pretty much the reason to watch the episode. It's kind of funny, it's just kind of below average, really.
Yeah, which is kind of the standard for a lot of these episodes that made the bottom of the list.
Yeah, I should clarify that, just because it's in the bottom 5 doesn't mean it's a bad episode. It just isn't a particularly good one. We're still in, season 2. The show's pretty strong overall. We're just, you gotta adjust your standards for that. Number 5, best episode of the season, for a bit of a contrast. We've got episode 11, How Hermes Requisitioned His Groove Back.
Which is surprising to me because I had that one in my lower half. So I guess you two must have driven the average up considerably.
I mean, I really like this episode.
I like it. It's fun. I enjoy the pacing of it. It just keeps going from one part to the next, but it doesn't feel rushed.
Yeah, it is really, as you said, it's really fast-paced. There's a lot of really good jokes, some really nice imagery in the central bureaucracy when we get there. Mm-hmm. The song at the end is catchy as heck.
Oh, absolutely. Hermes really does shine in this episode.
Oh, yeah, Hermes is a great character. I love Hermes.
There's also some, entertainment to get out of how hateable Morgan Proctor is.
Yeah.
Again, not the best episode in the series, but very solid. I thought it was a good time.
It's fun.
And, of course, naturally, we have way more to say about the bad episodes than the good ones.
Yeah.
Although I guess a lot of what we had to say we already said in, our episodes. So, number 4 worst episode of the season, episode 6, The Lesser of Two Evils.
I thought this one was alright. I put it in the middle.
Yeah, it's just kind of dull.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember this episode actually being pretty boring because it's, you know exactly what's going to happen as soon as you see it. It's like you know who the evil one is going to be. You know, it's kind of the Star Trek reference with the goatee, but of course the show is all about subverting the standard tropes. Just like, hey, wait, Bender was the evil one, and it's like you almost expect it to cut to Bart going, "Oh, don't be so shocked."
I was going to bring up that same joke. It really is just that one Simpsons episode.
And that was just a single segment on a 3-part on a Treehouse of Horrors. That the premise was only good enough for an 8-minute segment before.
And now we're dragging it out to, 22. Yeah, I really like Flexo, but I think I like him mainly for what they do with him later. When they bring him back in that one other episode.
Yeah.
But, here he's fun, but he really can't make up for an otherwise just kind of nothing episode. It just comes and goes,
Yeah. You don't really end up thinking too much about it.
I like some of the concepts introduced, though.
Yeah, I mean, extending Miss Universe to the rest of the universe. I mean, the current record is 100% in favor of Earth, 0 the rest of the universe. Come on, rest of the universe. Are you even trying?
Yeah, which I like that as an idea, but again, it's a very minor part of the episode. It's just kind of a reason for them to have a very valuable object for Bender to try to steal, which you don't even need Flexo for.
Yeah, it's all just kind of inconsequential.
Which I suppose you could say about most of these episodes.
Oh, sure, but at least in most of the other episodes, you have a lot of really good jokes to make up for it. Here, it's just kind of, okay, I guess that's funny, but you're not really laughing,
Yeah, the only real thing we got out of this episode was the Fry meme.
Yeah.
Suspicious.
The number 4 best episode of the season. On the other end of the spectrum, we have episode 14, Mother's Day.
Another fun one.
Oh yeah, this was a really fun one. I like this one a lot.
I mean, we finally get to see the, destroy all humans come into fruition.
It was really only a matter of time before they do the inevitable robot uprising episode. You can't have a sci-fi show with robots without doing that. And it's done pretty well. We get a lot of jokes about people relying on machinery, which, I mean, I'm not going to bang a Luddite drum and say tech bad, tech bad.
It's done in a fun way.
Yeah, it's silly things like, all stuff that they could very easily do for themselves if they, took like 5 minutes to put in the effort.
Well, of course, you have the greeting card kind of leading the charge. Just the stupidest concept. It's like, we will bring down the patriarchy.
Down with the patriarchy.
I mean, I can get behind that.
It's just adorable, but also...
It's cute, but terrifying.
Terracutifying.
The best kind of terrifying.
There's a lot of really good jokes in this episode. Fry inventing the wheel and screwing it up because of course he does.
Of course.
Did we even mention that joke in the actual episode? Because that was a really good joke.
I don't know.
I love this episode. It really is great. And especially the way it's not only just a very funny episode that plays with a concept that, of course they would have to do. It also introduces this idea of the professor and mom being bitter exes, which will carry through the rest of the series.
Yeah, so it's an important episode in terms of the overall storyline, and the fact that they were contemporaries, they are up there in ages. I think the professor's like 160, 170. I think they reveal
160 at this point. I think
That's what it was said.
Yeah, well, meanwhile, I think maybe Mom probably can just bribe the Sunset robots to ignore her.
Yeah, probably.
Probably.
Or if they're robots, she doesn't even have to bribe them. She just press the button to say, ignore me.
That's a good point. I didn't even consider that.
She probably owns the near-death star.
Why would she make something like that, I wonder? But
Get rid of all of her rivals.
I don't want to try to plumb the depths of Mom's depraved mind. That way lies madness.
I'm glad your sentence ended with mind. Moving on.
Yeah, so the number 3 worst of the season is episode 7, Put Your Head on My Shoulders.
A lot of these had to do with heads or two-of-a-kind themes.
This one just, it's a very negative and bitter episode, and the transphobic joke on top of that just leaves a bad taste in your mouth.
Yeah, this episode really is just very mean-spirited. I was not a fan. And it sucks because Fry and Amy are just, they're a really cute couple. I wanted to see more of that.
Yeah, they are. They have a lot. They have a lot in common. Obviously, they're of relatively similar ages, and they actually they like each other. Unlike Fry pining for Leela, who never seems to reciprocate.
Well, that does develop as the series goes on, but
Of course, yeah, but at this point in time, it's like, yeah, they both like each other. They should be together. But then it turns out Fry's just a pretty shitty boyfriend.
Yeah, but okay, with Fry and Amy in particular, it also feels like this episode was kind of a waste, because I've been thinking about it since we watched it. And imagine if we'd gotten a whole season subplot out of this, of Fry dating Amy and maybe using this to have Leela maybe realize that part of her is jealous and start to think maybe she does kind of like Fry, and actually use this to propel forward their arc. There was a lot of potential for interesting development there, and it feels like this episode just kind of wasted it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do sort of touch on that a tiny bit, but really, considering all the stuff that Fry has done, all the dates that he has been on with other people and all the love interests that he's had, which we're going to get to another one in a couple of them in a little bit, it's weird that pretty much every episode that has Fry with someone else is one of the weaker episodes of this season.
Yeah, it's a little weird, but I don't know, man. This episode is just, a
lot of wasted potential, because the idea of kind of being breaking up with someone and then being literally stitched to them, that's a little out there in terms of comedy, a little bit sci-fi to work, but for a sci-fi comedy, that's a perfectly reasonable premise. But they don't really do enough with. I suppose they do enough with the concept, but they don't make an enjoyable episode out of it.
Yeah. Honestly, the one good thing I can say about this episode is I did kind of enjoy the lesbian joke, separate from the really terrible transphobic joke, but you can make jokes about queer people without it being awful. That's what I'm saying here, and it's so frustrating that this episode got it right in one, and then got it so wrong just a few minutes later. But really, overall, this whole episode is just really mean, complete waste of a concept. It's to be fair, at least it's kind of funny sometimes, so it's probably why it's not even lower on this list, but yeah, it's not a great one.
Yeah.
Let's take a breather from that with the number 3 best episode of the season, which is episode 18, The Honking.
This one was also around the middle for me, but that's not because I don't like it. I just found others to be, more memorable for me. But I still love this episode. It's great.
Yeah, this was one of my favorites of the season. I love just these kinds of horror concepts, haunted houses, werewolves. I love this shit. And they went in a really fun, really interesting direction with it.
Oh yeah, they introduced the concept because what do they do with werewolves and robots? Well, there's a really weird joke that I don't think any of us mentioned, is it crept around on round rubber feet like a wolf. And wait, what? When do wolves have round rubber feet? I get paw pads or something, but and then of course there's the idea that the It's a regular terrestrial car, not a hover car.
Maybe it's all those rubber wolves they have on the college campus.
Right.
What?
They're
Those
supposed to
wolves that
scare
wander
the
onto
geese
campus
away.
and then rack up a small fortune in bills.
What?
No, what? No, my school campus has like these fake rubber wolves that are supposed to like keep the geese away.
Oh.
And they're just these weird, horrific abominations against nature.
Wow.
What the fuck?
That's why the geese don't go there. It's not that they're afraid of the wolves. It's just what are you people doing? Let's not even bother with you guys.
I mean, I think you would scare the students as much as the geese with that kind of thing. Like,
Exactly. It's horrible. I'll have to show you a photo at some time.
like you were talking with just what you were talking about, like rubber wolves, and it was like, what is this some kind of a fetish thing or?
Well, I'm sure it is a fetish thing, but that's not what we're talking about here.
Anyway, yeah, just a lot of this was anyway. The honking. This was one of those many episodes that was almost Simpson style, split into two unrelated plots. But honestly, both of them in this episode are really freaking good. Like, I couldn't tell you which one I liked more. They're both just excellent.
It's just funny.
It's interesting that it's kind of a Halloween episode that is still considered canon, because they do try to make a kind of a scientific explanation for things like robot ghosts and robot werewolves.
Yes, that combination of words the professor said makes perfect sense.
Exactly.
Yes.
To quote someone that I saw on Twitter, you can't just put words together like that and call it a sentence.
You can if you want to.
You can if you photosynthesize it.
I guess so. Anyway, yeah, the honking. Good episode. I'm definitely going to add it to my Halloween special rotation, even though it's not, explicitly a Halloween special.
It's close enough to it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely close enough.
Yeah.
It's your list. You make whatever you want on it.
Fair point. So, the number 2 worst episode of the season. Episode 5. Why must I be a crustacean in love?
I wanna like this episode. Just because of the whole, working with aliens and different things, but it's just so heteronormative. It's just, ugh.
Yes, exactly. I really wanted to like this episode. Like, especially since we get all this insight into Zoidberg and the culture of his people and Planet Decapodia, and some really inventive visuals, that whole, like, I kind of want to call it beach punk aesthetic. But
that's a pretty good way of putting it, yeah.
It really is so extremely heteronormative, and it just brings it all down. And then there's, like, the whole trying to trick this woman into liking Zoidberg, and it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth.
Someone left the seafood out too long.
My issues with it weren't so much on that front. It's just really the fact that it wastes kind of a really good comedic farce premise. Like, you don't like seeing Fry and Zoidberg fight, I guess. They have some pretty decent things. They have some pretty decent jokes, like they have playing the Star Trek music when they're fighting. But then it's just they're really kind of torn over this idea that just, you really don't need to fight over this sort of thing. Just talk it out. I mean, I get the idea that he's kind of going through roid rage or Decapodian breeding rage or whatever, and he's not listening to reason. But this guys, calm down. It's just this girl, and then you're gonna die anyway. So.
One joke, I guess it's sort of a joke, I didn't point out at the time was the one guy saying, like, I've dedicated my whole life to celibacy. So does everyone else. They have to.
Fair point. But yeah, like, this episode, I think it had some good individual jokes. Like, there were moments in it that I thought were really funny, but on the whole, it's just unpleasant. It's a lot of the same issues with, put your head on my shoulders. It's just honestly kind of worse here. You know what I mean? It's just very of its time and a little bit gross. I don't know what else I have to say about this one.
It's just kind of a nothing episode.
So, the number 2 best episode of the season, episode 4, Xmas Story.
Oh yes. Just like the honking is going to make it into Halloween rotations, this episode should be in Xmas rotations.
It's a very sweet episode.
Yeah, it really is. Especially compared to, Put Your Head on My Shoulders, which could count as a Valentine's episode.
A little
This
bit, yeah.
is, a holiday episode that actually feels heartwarming.
Despite the fact that it's about hiding from evil robot Santa.
I mean, that's a thing that happens in it, but I wouldn't say that's what it's about. It's more about, Fry and Leela and their friendship and the budding potential romance there. Because I actually think this might have been the first episode where we start to see Fry having any feelings for Leela in the first place. I could be remembering wrong, but I think this might be where it started.
Well, the crux of this episode is Fry realizing that he has a problem with having no family, and so does Leela, so they have that in common.
I mean, they can be each other's family.
Exactly.
It's not as funny as some of the other episodes in the season, but it really is very cute and heartwarming, and I definitely appreciate that. It's a nice thing.
It doesn't have to be funny.
Part of the reason I like it, but I also I enjoy the concept. I enjoy the concept of the evil robot Santa, and it works with the world building. It's like they made this robot, and he is supposed to be Santa, but his threshold for being nice was set too high, so everybody's deemed as naughty. It's like that's an extremely understandable robot-based Santa concept.
It's just cute. And you can't go wrong with swarms of lizards.
This is also true.
Yeah, girls like swarms of things, right?
Depends on the girl. Oh, this is going to be a rough one, but yeah, so the worst episode of the season is episode 19, the season finale, The Cryonic Woman.
I mean, what is there else to say that we said last week?
Yeah, that's honestly a good point. It really is just kind of we've been using the phrase nothing episode a lot here, but this really is a nothing episode.
I had this one at the absolute bottom of my list. What about you?
Yep, same.
I think it was second worst. I think I had Head on My Shoulders as the worst. Let me check. Yeah, I had it as second worst.
So yeah, we were almost universal on this one.
Yeah,
this was just a really clunky episode that didn't amount to much, because again, it's like kind of 2-3 different concepts just kind of pushed together. The fact that they're going back to their old jobs, the fact that he encounters his old girlfriend who was never that good for him to begin. Pretty much every one of these episodes deals with Fry's relationship. Like all the bottom 3 deals with Fry being in some shitty relationship.
Well, here's the thing. So Put Your Head on My Shoulders and Why Must I Be a Crustacean in Love have some really just gross stuff in them and make me uncomfortable to watch. The Cryonic Woman is just... It commits the even worse crime of being dull. Of being so completely disposable that there's really nothing in it worth seeing. Even if you want to get upset, there's just nothing here. And especially since it is such a waste, because there's so much potential in the concept of Fry meeting an ex from the 20th century and getting to explore, his history and who he is and his place in the future and, how this would affect him and all of his friends. But instead, we just get 10 minutes of Fry and Bender farting around at the cryogenics lab and then another 10 minutes of Fry bickering with his ex.
And then just kind of all leading up to jokes about LA is a shitty place. Like, yeah, we get it. You don't need an entire... It's kind of like when a comedian starts doing only jokes about show business. It's like, they've been in the business too damn long because that's their entire life now.
That's not a bad comparison. This episode is just... It's not even funny. It's not even painfully unfunny. It's just... You sit there stone-faced the entire time. There's just nothing here.
Which is a shame, because the concepts, as you said, and not just, Fry meeting an ex, but the whole job thing as well. We should know more about the whole job chip system.
I would have liked to see more of Leela as a delivery boy. There could have been some funny concepts there, I feel like.
Okay, so this is honestly the worst kind of split into two plots episode, because either one of these things could have supported an entire episode on their own, and they probably would have been a lot better for it. Just, like, give us a full episode of Fry and Bender working at the cryogenics lab and Leela being stuck as a low-paid delivery boy. Give us a full episode of Fry meeting his ex from the 20th century and exploring that. Take the time you need to actually flesh these things out.
Yeah, it's because, and then of course you see these two ideas and you realize that they're wasted here, because then if they were to try to do the same idea later, is that no, we already did that episode idea before and it didn't work. Like, well, yeah, because you didn't give it the time to you didn't give it the time to breathe. Really, the biggest problem with this episode is that it kind of takes the whimsy out of the future. You have Fry meeting these. When Fry was thawed out, he was scared, but then he was also like optimistic and eventually learning about the future. When his girlfriend finds out about it, she's like, "Oh my god, everything's horrible. I need to leave." It's like, you've been here a week. Calm down.
I mean, if I'm sorry, you just reminded me of I don't have any memory of this because I was a little kid at the time, but according to my mom, when I was like 5 years old and we moved from New Jersey to Connecticut, apparently for the first several weeks, I would actually ask my parents when we were going to move back to New Jersey.
Aww.
I can understand that, yeah.
I have no memory of this, but just Colleen being there for like a week and giving up on her new home, just for whatever reason, the way you worded that made me think of this, but that has nothing to do with anything. I don't know why I brought it up.
Well, she does seem to have the mentality of a child still, so I suppose it's appropriate for her to react in a very similar way.
I guess. It just... Man, this episode, I don't even know what else there is to say about it.
Fuck Michelle.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Fuck Michelle. She is just terrible.
The episode that made Eden drop an F-bomb.
I mean... Have I not said the F-bomb?
Not often.
Finally, from the episode that was almost unanimous to the episode that was unanimous. Every single one of us put this at number 1.
Yeah, let's end this off on a really positive note. The best episode of the season, without question. As TZ said, all 3 of us rated this as our favorite of the season. Episode 15, The Problem with Poplars.
It's just so fun. Just the title is fun to say, Poplars. I
mean, whoever thought that an episode about eating people could be so good?
It's just such a well-written episode. It's classic sci-fi. It's classic guys like, oh my god, we've been doing the terrible thing this whole time, but they make it funny. They make it really great. They have this great jokey commentary about insane like animal rights activists, and it's like the fact that I agree with you doesn't mean you're right. It's like the fact that I agree with you doesn't mean you're doing the right thing, because they're like absolute assholes about everything. But then even when Leela is agreeing with them, they're still being assholes, and they're really kind of hurting her cause when she has like a legitimate concern. But then they're like, no, yeah, nobody should be eating the animals. Yes, yeah, no, that's not what I'm talking about. Please, you're not affiliated with me.
Honestly, there's a lot we could talk about with this episode, but we did a whole episode of the podcast breaking it down in detail and why it was so good. It's really funny. I mean, I don't even know what you guys need to hear about it. Like, if you've seen the episode, you know why it's fantastic.
Yeah, this is one of those episodes there, if you're trying to get someone into Futurama, this is one of the episodes to kind of start with, outside of like the first 2 episodes to get them familiar with the premise. But yeah, Problem with Poplars is definitely one of the best ones of the entire series, I would say.
Yeah, it's something where if you're flipping through, the TV, do our watchers still have cable? Anyway, you're flipping through the TV, you see it's on, you're like, yeah, I'll watch it.
Yeah, like, this is just absolute peak classic Futurama. Fantastic episode. I don't even know how many other ways that I can word this. It is just really good, really funny. You've got all of the characters at their best. Everyone gets a scene or two to shine. Well, I mean, I guess Amy's barely in it, but...
That's not what really matters here anyway. Sorry, Ames.
I mean, hell, even Zap is actually decent in this episode. Like, this is an episode with Zap where I don't hate him for once, because he's actually trying to do good.
Finally, he is somewhat competent.
Matter of time.
Probably because he had other people kind of guiding him what to do.
Well, I mean, you know what they say about stopped clocks. They don't keep time.
What? Okay.
His plan almost worked.
It did! I'm still impressed. Anyway, season 2 as a whole, what do we think?
I think it was pretty good.
The season had much higher ups and much lower downs than the first season. I feel like they tried a lot more with the concept, and not all of them worked. Obviously, like every idea isn't going to work, and some of them have a rather obvious thud. But I feel like the good episodes introduce a lot of really fun concepts. Even the ones that are weaker, they kind of set the stage for things that are going to happen later. Like you have the introducing of Nixon as the president of Earth. You have the introduction of Farnsworth and Mom's relationship. You have the introduction of Qbert, which we haven't even mentioned, because that was where did the Clone of My Own fit into the list?
Yeah, that was actually, it just barely missed the top 5.
That was tied with Anthology of Interest. Yeah, that was tied with number 6. Tied at number 6 or number 7, I suppose, depending on which way you count.
I should point out something. While we were looking at this TZ, you mentioned that you were really hoping Brannigan Begin Again would be at the exact middle. Because...
I have no strong feelings one way or the other.
Yeah. And it was 1 point off from hitting...
Yeah, 1 point off.
So, overall, this was definitely a much more ambitious season than season 1. They're definitely settling into a groove, and, they've... At this point, we know who all the characters are, we've established the premise, we've got the world building, and now it's a point of, let's see what we can do with this. And, yeah, there are lower lows, but there also are much higher highs, and I think that's definitely a worthwhile trade-off. Especially since, Season 2, we're still in the sex and pizza era of Futurama. You know what they say about sex and pizza, when it's good, it's really good, and when it's bad, it's still pretty good. Here in Futurama, when it's bad, it is still perfectly watchable.
Yeah.
But the good episodes are, up there with the best animated comedy ever.
Definitely.
All right, so unless anyone else has something to add, then I guess we'll see everyone next time in Season 3. Thank you for listening to Space Podcast 3000. Your 3 voices of the future are Nova Altman, Doug Hancox, and Eden Valerie. The theme music is Voxel Revolution by Kevin MacLeod. You can hear more episodes of Space Podcast 3000 on YouTube or at soundcloud.com/spacepod3k. You can support the show and listen to new episodes a full week early at patreon.com/spacepod3k. Follow us on Twitter at spacepod3k. Be sure to join us next season as the Planet Express crew go on a double date in Amazon Women in the Mood.